What's good, Dragon Brood? Coming today to give you the final Ikoria set review on Friday, April 10th. Man, it feels like we've been doing these forever, but no, it's actually a pretty short season. Today they put out the full set list, which we knew was going to happen, and it's mostly commons and uncommons. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to just hit the cards with just a couple of quick sentences. Most of these aren't going to be game breakers. Some are just ones I'm going to mention just because, hey, they're kind of neat, or they're going to fill voids, or they might be good sideboard cards. So just to kind of go through them, because there were a lot of cards today, I'm going to see how quick we can get through them and turn it into a little something. And if you could, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get to it. All right, Light of Hope, cool instant, good just in the sense that it gives you 3 options, and it's a reasonable sideboard card if you need something to destroy enchantments, which we may be in a world where that's a thing. If you just need to gain some life, it's cool. And there's some decks that just can be wanting to take advantage of counters, or particularly +1/+1 counters. So it does have some main deck room and a few things, but my guess is it'd be kind of a flexible sideboard card slot. I feel like we don't know what the human deck are going to look like yet, but the Perimeter Sergeant actually fills a pretty decent role. It's a 3/2 for 3, which is fine, but whenever it attacks, it gives all of your humans +1/+1. So if you're playing the heavy aggro, everybody gets bonuses type deck, this will fit perfectly in there. Probably not for all builds, but it definitely works for that one. So Anticipate is back. Nothing too big here, just mentioning that it got reprinted. That and the artwork looks similar to a Brainstorm if you're not careful, so just something to be aware of. The Glimmer Bell is a weird card. It's a 1/3 for 2, and it has flying, so it's not terrible, but it does have the ability to untap, which in and of itself isn't crazy, but when you think about the possibility of being able to mutate something onto it that possibly has a tap as an activation cost, could be pretty awesome. Don't really know. Maybe it fits in somewhere else, but just something to bring up that's going to be around whenever you're playing limited. I kind of have mixed feelings on this whole cycle of cards. So Mythos of Illuna is weird in the sense that it's a blue card that lets you copy a thing, and then great. So you copy a permanent, but if it's a creature and you paid red-green as part of the casting cost, then it fights something when it comes into play. I'm not sure how powerful this is, but if you are sideboarding it or even playing it, I guess, in against another creature matchup and you're playing something with Teamer colors, it probably has some extra value. But it's just a very weird card to have around. I have a feeling, though, it will have some niche spots in the format, so definitely something you can get caught off guard by. And your best creature could become your worst enemy, and it'll get to kill something you control. So just something to keep an eye on, but it's a pretty interesting card. I would say of this cycle of cards, this is probably the one I'm most likely to play so far. Now, when we're talking about decks that are going to play all those different types of counters, this is the type of creature you'd want in the low end, because it actually gives you a choice of Death Touch or Lifelink, and it's a 2/1 for 2. So it can be played as a way to block your opponent's early start, or just give you Lifelink down the road, or playing against a red deck, maybe you just give it Lifelink so you can block, kill something, and gain 2 life. So it's a fairly versatile little 2-mana creature, and you're going to need some things to fill up the lower end of that curve in those style of decks, and this is a perfect card to fit in there. Hunted Nightmare is pretty interesting because it's a 4/5 for 3, and it has Menace, so of course you knew it was going to have a downside. And the downside is that you put a Death Touch counter on one of your opponent's creatures. The interesting thing is, though, we've already started to see that you could build around Menace entirely, so the fact that your opponent has a thing with Death Touch may not matter all that much because they'd have to double or in some cases even triple block your Menace creatures anyway. The other part of that is there's enough times you're going to run into decks that aren't even playing a lot of creatures, so you could just play this or even sideboard it in that style of deck to just have a 4/5 creature for 3 that your opponent really has to deal with and has no downside at that point. I mean, imagine if they're playing like Teamer mid-range or the type of like bank control decks we're seeing. It's mostly just planeswalkers and a finisher. You know, occasionally they may have like a Hydroid Krasis or something, but other than that, it's not really going to matter. You just get a 4/5 creature for free. Well, not for free. For 3, but with no downside. So it's really a pretty cool card. You know, I don't think Raking Claws is great, but I do like the idea of giving something double strike. And if you don't have a target for it, you can cycle it. Because that seems to be the downside of some of the other ones that we've had reprinted recently, is though they're good cards, they don't necessarily do anything a big chunk of the time, or it's just not worth taking the risk. In this case, you could replace the card and try to get something else you can play. Not sure if it really makes it into any decks, but it's cool that it's at least a card created in a way that you'll consider it. So Excavating Mole is a very interesting card because it could fill two different roles. It could be a 3-cost 3/3 in some decks that just need to fill the graveyard but want a decent body in the way. Or it could be the type of card that's just in a deck because it's taking advantage of the trample ability. So which one is going to win out? I don't really know. Where does it fit? I have no idea. But it's definitely a thing there when you're deck building to at least give it a look. Ram Through is pretty neat. It's filling a different role in that bite style of card. So your creature gets to deal its damage to target creature. So it's not a fight, it's actually a bite. They're not going to fight back, your creature's just dealing the damage. It's also instant speed for only 2 mana, which is nice, one of only which is colored. Also nice. And then if for some reason there's excess damage, that just goes to the creature's controller. The only downside of this card is I wish it also hit Planeswalkers, but that's a lot to ask for the first attempt on a card like this. I think it's actually pretty good, and this is a card that could end up being a removal card in some of these maybe Gruul style aggro decks that want to side in some creature kill. Could be a nice bonus to have. Get 2 creatures back from the graveyard for 2 mana? Yeah, sure, count me in. And here I was thinking this ultimatum was probably not going to be as good as the others. This is actually pretty nice. You look at the top 5 cards, and if there's any permanents there, they just come into play. Now, it's only 5 cards, so it's not huge, but there is a chance that you get 2 or 3 creatures and a couple of lands, and you're all set. If you don't get it and you get spells, they just go into your hand. So there's no real loss. You basically will get all 5 cards. It's just, what's the impact? Don't know if it's better in a deck where you can set it up, or maybe you just play this as something as a recovery card, maybe when they sweep your board or something. But it's cool to see that this at least came out on par, mostly, with the other ones. Okay, 4 mana enchantment. Kind of creates its own little mini engine, which sounds like some other 4 mana enchantments we have in the format. That said, put a creature in your graveyard every turn. Yeah, or at least cards in your graveyard, but that's something decks want to do anyway, so that's kind of cool. Exiling a creature to only get colorless mana and you can't use it to play X spells, it's a little bit of a downer, but depending on how the deck's built, maybe you can just use that mana to cast other things. So definitely going to be something you want to build around or really put focus on so you can take advantage of it in the deck you put it in. But cool card still. So far, I feel like this is the weakest of the companions. I mean, you have to start with at least 20 more cards than your opponent, so that's already going to be a little bit of a downer. It is a 4/5 flyer for 5, and that's okay. And then when it comes into play, you can blink any number of permanents. But, I'm not really there yet on this card. This was a late entry from yesterday, but Bonder's Enclave. Very cool. You can tap it for colorless, you can pay 3 and tap it and draw a card, and you can only activate that ability if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So the cool part about this is it's not a card that just goes into all the control decks so they can just draw extra cards. You actually have to dedicate to having a creature on the table. So in some ways, it actually benefits the aggro decks or the creature decks really to really try to take advantage of and give you cards later to keep up with some of the slower decks. So very cool that this exists. It's also a rare, which means the developers also see something in this card. Not sure it's going to be more than a 1 or 2 of in many decks, just because having that much colorless mana when you already are going to have the triomes coming into play tapped and possibly still playing temples, it's going to just make you too slow in some cases because you're going to need more colored mana on time, but still a cool card. And then it looks like everything else is basic lands, gain life lands, the ones that are 2 colors when they come into play tap, gain a life, and evolving wilds. So no surprises there otherwise on the lands, so that's pretty cool. Overall, this has been a pretty exciting preview season for being so short. Like, the cards are very awesome. I think there's some new decks that can come out of this. There's definitely cards that fit into existing decks. Like, just a lot of stuff's going to be happening. So really, really exciting. I'll definitely be talking about more about Ikoria on our podcast, which will be up next Tuesday. And I will definitely be part of the streamer early access event on Wednesday where we get to play with the cards. Thanks a lot to Wizards of the Coast, by the way, for inviting me. I'm going to do 2 sessions. I'm going to be doing noon to 5 Pacific time, and then I'll be doing 7 to midnight, also Pacific time. And I'm going to be doing 2 drawings on those. So if you want to catch me on Twitch, it's at twitch.tv/PowrDragn if you want to find me there. And I'll be doing 2 different giveaways, one in the afternoon session, one in the evening session, and then an additional drawing for our subscribers. So just giving a bunch of stuff away. It's going to be really awesome. And you should see some decks coming up on the channel pretty soon. I'm going to be doing some deck techs on a few different decks I put together using Ikoria cards. So you can expect to see those in the next couple of days. And speaking of which, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Hit the notification button so you can get notified whenever I do have those deck lists up, because I kind of want to hear what everybody thinks about them, or even other ideas that you'd want to try in them, and maybe I will put them up on the early access streamer event. But yeah, let me know what you thought about the set, what you're thinking about it, how you feel about the new abilities. There's a lot happening in this set, so hopefully a lot of these cards get played because there's a lot of cool stuff. But that's it for today. It's cool to wrap up the season like this, and it's time to start brewing decks. We'll see you next time.